Good morning, everyone. This is Phil Dixon, doing a little baseball report this morning. Let me get my camera straightened out here. And yeah, doing a little reporting here. And I guess you can see a kind of hazy day here in Kansas City. Not a lot of sunshine, about 70 some odd degrees, which is kind of cool for this time of year. I know we're getting into September, but for this time of year in Kansas City, a little cool. And so I'm out here in the 70-degree weather, no sunshine today, and mostly cloudy, got a little sprinkles. So I'm going to give you a little report. So I want to thank everybody for joining in. If you're joining in later, my name is Phil S. Dixon. I'm a baseball historian and an author, and I'm going to be talking about historic facts that happened on today. Of course, today is September 1st, 2025, so I'm going to be talking about some things that happened on historically on September, or things that were reported in the newspaper related to African American, the African American baseball experience. So we're going to jump right in. I hope everybody's having a wonderful Labor Day weekend, and looking forward to lots of football. I'm sure everybody watched lots of football yesterday, and baseball still goes on. So let's jump right in here. And by the way, before I get started, I do want to mention this. As a historian, it's always important to be well read. And so I'm going through actually a couple of books I'm reading here. These are books I hope to finish here probably this week. This is a book about Henry Warren Sowing, and he was the founder of Douglas State Bank. And it says the remarkable story of a black boy born in the depths of poverty who rose to establish the first bank owned and operated by black people in the Midwest. Now, what's interesting is, as a youth, I played for the Douglas State Bank baseball team. And so I want to learn as much as I can. Of course, this is in my hometown, so I expect to learn a lot more about Kansas City, Kansas, which was also the hometown of the Kansas City, Kansas Giants, the professional baseball team that originated here in 1907 that played at Riverside Park. Also, I'm reading this book too, and this one is The Story of Kansas City. And this is really Kansas City, Missouri. And it says The City at Work. And this book right here is kind of interesting. It was published, let me see, by the Board of Education. And looks like it was a 1947 book, somewhere in there. 1945 was when it was originally written. What's interesting is here, if you write the history of Kansas City now, you're going to mention the Kansas City Monarchs and baseball. But when they were writing in the 1940s, they didn't mention anything about baseball. And that's one of the things I sought to change as I did research and began to talk on this topic. I wanted to make sure that the people who were played integral parts in the history of the city got recognized. And so that meant to talk about the Kansas City Monarchs and people like Frank Duncan and the great catcher, Bullet Rogan, the great pitcher, Newt Allen, the great second baseman. I can go on and name other people like Rube Curry, ended up playing for Hilldale, played in the first four, what they call, quote, colored World Series, but 1924, 25, 26, and 27, Rube Curry went to Lincoln High School. And so sometime I'll talk about Lincoln High School and all the great people who came out of Lincoln. So anyway, that's kind of like where I'm starting out here. Let me get a drink right quick. Lots of stuff to talk about today, but I'm going to start September 1st, 1903. And there was a report in the Waterloo, Iowa newspaper that reported an all-white city. That was going to be the motto for Waterloo, Iowa. And this means not only that Negroes are not wanted as residents, but they will not be tolerated here. About a dozen families were there at the start of the movement. Said the trouble began some weeks ago when a colored baseball team played here, and members of the team reportedly became too attentive to impressionable white girls. The citizens then decided to compel all colored people to leave. Kind of interesting, an all-white city, 1903 in Iowa. And of course, there were conflicting stories about maybe it wasn't true, but here's what we do know. the team that came in there was the Chicago Union Giants, 1903. Dave Wyatt, who later became a great biographer and reporter and chronicled the career of Rube Foster in ways that no one else had at the time, was a member of that team, and they came in. And part of the thing is, I did a follow-up on it, and this was in the Waterloo Courier on August the 3rd. Now, part of the story started when on August the 2nd, and of course I followed the story through the Waterloo Courier, and it said police raided a Baldy, I'm going to say BAWD, Baldy house on Lafayette Street last night, securing 3 men and 3 women. 2 of the men were colored and the women were all white. Let's see, and of the soiled dove varieties. I think you can kind of know what that means. I said they all denied the charges brought against them, and will have a hearing later. That was the beginning of this whole thing in Waterloo. And then August the 3rd, same newspaper, and they went a little deeper. They said the Dusky players, and they're talking about the black team coming there, and they played the Waterloo team. Now, the Waterloo team played 2 predominantly black teams that year. They played the Algona, Iowa Brownies, and of course the Chicago Union Giants. But this is referring to the Union Giants here, August 3rd, because it's closer to the date of the actual banishment of what they call the colored people from Waterloo. And it said the Dusky players, the Union Giants, because they were associated with white players in the sport, assumed the, quote, air of equality with their competitors. They were really good ball players, and their work on the diamond made them heroes in the eyes of many susceptible people, especially young white girls. They were not slow to take what advantages they could socially of this, and the parents of several of the girls aroused to the conditions of the affair began to complain. So it was pretty tough for these African American baseball players on the road, because first of all, you came into a town, you weren't allowed to associate with people in the town, and if you associated too friendly, then you were labeled. And as a consequence, in Waterloo, no black team was invited back there for at least another 8 or 9 years because of this incident that happened in 1903. And these are some of the pitfalls of traveling and barnstorming on the road. But I know I had talked to many African American ball players, and they would say that, you know, when you went into these towns, you never talked to the white girls, and you just went in there and played ball and beat up on the locals, and got out of there and went back to, in their case, they went back to Chicago. So it was tough sledding out there in the world of baseball. I just want to bring that to you. That was 1903, and that started September the 1st, 1903 was one of the first reports. You can look all this up. Let's go to September the 1st, 1914. William Bill Lindsay, age 23, a former Lexington, Missouri Tiger and Kansas City, Kansas Giant pitcher, and in 1910 member of the Chicago Leland Giants and later the Chicago American Giants, died in Chicago, Illinois. He was truly one of the all-time greats. I wrote that, and I believe that. William Bill Lindsay came from a family of ball players out of Lexington, Missouri. There was so many of them that with 2 cousins, they had enough to actually be the entire team, all their brothers. Interesting thing, he had 7 brothers. And I went to Lexington, done a lot of research over the years, and as far as I know, none of his brothers ever had children. And they were from Lexington. I know one of them ended up passing away. I think, I can't remember what his name was, but he worked at a tavern here in Kansas City, Missouri, down on Vine Street. He passed away, and I knew a lady bartender who knew him real well. But as far as I can tell, none of them ever had children. And talking about 7 boys and no children. Another side factor, when Bill Lindsay died, I was interviewing, I guess it was a guy named Floyd Bowdridge, who was a ball player himself, played for the Lexington Tigers. This is probably 1981. And Floyd said that when Bill's body was brought back to Lexington, Missouri, it was the largest funeral in the history of the city. And at that time, that was 1980. So unless they had a larger funeral since, Bill Lindsay's funeral was larger. So he was not only liked by African American people, and they had a sizable community, but he was also loved by white people as well in that small town of Lexington, Missouri. Unfortunately, they buried him in the what we would call an African American cemetery, and I've been down there and been part of a group that helped to kind of clean that cemetery up. I've been down there, but the problem is nobody knows where he's buried. He didn't get a marker, and no one knows who. There's no one living, and no one was living at that time to actually know which part of the cemetery he was buried in. So when you go to Lexington, there's a plaque outside the cemetery saying that Bill Lindsay is buried there. And so just simply an outstanding, one of the greatest teenage pitchers that ever lived. When he passed away, he was considered one of the 4 greatest pitchers in the world. That's talking about American National League as well. And people like Charles Kaminsky also sent wreaths to his funeral. So just know Bill Lindsay is a name you might not hear very often, but it's a name that you should not, just glaze over and act like it doesn't mean anything. Okay, Bill Lindsay. And let's go to another one. September 1st, 1904. Andrew Rube Foster whiffed 18 Cuban X-Giant batters, winning 8-4 in the opening game of the World Series. The contest played at Atlantic City, New Jersey. He elated more than 4,000 fans that attended the game. One thing about the African American teams, they drew very well. And there are games here. I know I go to minor league games, been to many minor league games over the years, and and some of these teams would be affiliated with major league teams, and they wouldn't have 4,000 people at the game. But people really love baseball, and they knew the importance of the Cuban Giants, and then they were playing, of course, the Philadelphia Giants, and Rube Foster came out, and he was playing for the Philadelphia Giants, and struck out 18 batters. If this guy had been in the National American League, striking out 18 batters, that would have put him up there with, some of the all-time greats, Rube Waddell and Christy Mathewson of that period. But because he was African American, he's doing this outside of the American National League, people blew it off for generations. And I'm just happy that I was able to come by and do my part to keep this history alive and keep telling these stories and keep reminding you that greatness was there all the time. I just want you to know. Of course, Andrew Rube Foster ended up dying in 1930 in Kankakee, Illinois. I had the great honor of knowing his daughter-in-law, Doris, his sister. I knew his sister as well. And also, I remember talking to his sister's husband. They were divorced at the time. I think he lived in St. Louis. And I interviewed him. And I remember trying real hard to ask him, how was Rube acting? Because Rube was in the mental hospital in Kankakee, Illinois. There's a long story behind this, but I won't get into that tonight. But that's where he was, in Kankakee. It was the mental hospital there, the state hospital. And so I would ask the son-in-law, said, or I guess, yeah, his brother-in-law would have been, what symptoms did he exhibit? And the reason I wanted to know that is because I knew somewhere along the way, I was probably going to run into a doctor, somebody who's a baseball historian, also a physician, and maybe I could tell them what this guy told me, and they can give me more of a diagnosis of what Rube Foster was suffering from. So I tried to get ask many questions, but I tried to get as much information as I could to bleed out whatever stories that might help me in the future related to this great African-American baseball pitcher, manager, president of the first Negro National League, Andrew Rube Foster, out of Calvert, Texas. So that's Andrew Rube Foster. Okay, and let's go to another one. Let's see. I'm going to go to this one. September 1st, 1960. Let's move in a little Major League Baseball history. Cardinals' George Crowe added to his Major League record, hitting the 14th pinch hit home run of his big league career and a 7-4 loss to the Cincinnati Reds. Now, George Crowe, and one of the early St. Louis Cardinals, black players to join the St. Louis Cardinals. What's interesting about this, whenever I would see records like this in the 50s, the 40s, the 60s of guys coming into the major leagues, it just reminded me to keep working, because that means that all this talent was there all the time, but it just wasn't getting recognized. So here comes George Crowe. He had played for the New York Black Yankees, and of course he ended up coming through, making his way to the St. Louis Cardinals. And this guy's hitting pinch hit home runs, and was setting a major league record for pinch hit home runs. Who would think this would happen? You know, think about all the white players who came through what we call the major leagues, right? Who wasn't always the major leagues, but they were certainly the National American League. All the players, literally thousands of ball players who had come through. And all of a sudden, these black ball players who a generation earlier, they were telling us they weren't fit to play. They didn't have the ability to play in this game of Major League Baseball, were coming through and setting all kinds of records. How did this happen? Well, it happened because the talent was always there, always there. And so if you want to go back, you know, to George Stovey or Bud Fowler, if you want to go back, you know, to 1800s, there were lots of ball players already there. Frank Grant, who's in the Hall of Fame, and even Saul White. Saul White, who started out from Bel Air, Ohio, started out as a great baseball player, probably one of the premier managers that ever lived. He was right there with John McGraw and who I want to say, Connie Mack over in Philadelphia. And Saul White is leading the Philadelphia Giants. They were the first team to win 500 games under his leadership in consecutive years. You add all those years together, these guys won 500 games under his leadership. At a time, the Chicago Cubs wouldn't do that until much later, probably around 1910. The Philadelphia Giants had done that from 1902 to 1907. Already had won 500 victories under Saul White. But we did not get anything, any information, learn anything about Saul White until modern day. And when I say modern day, I'm probably saying the last 50 years. And I know I've been at it for 40 some odd years, and I've seen the history kind of grow, but the growth of the history has not yet matured. So if we were to say this was a child growing, I would say black baseball history probably still a teenager, and it's not an adult yet, because there's so much more to learn. So just kind of give you an idea. And let's see. That is probably about it. I do have one more here from 1974. September 1st, 1974. Elmore Mo Harris ends his Triple Crown season with the Class A Wisconsin Rapids Twins of the Midwest League, batting .339 with 32 homers and 113 RBIs. And amazingly, with that kind of performance in 1974, he was not promoted to the Minnesota Twins. Just imagine that. You think the Minnesota Twins couldn't have used that guy? Nowadays, you got guys, they don't even stay in one minor league long enough to hit 32 home runs. You start hitting home runs like that, you know, and you're, say in his case, he was an A ball, you're going to be in double A ball, triple A ball, and probably up with the main team before the season is in. So, but this guy just labored around, and there were many guys like that. I remember talking to a guy, Thumper Jackson, up in Sioux City, Iowa, who was a guy that was just a great minor league ball player, never got a chance. And I'm trying to think, there was my first coach, I'm going to call his name right in a minute. I had so many coaches growing up. But anyway, my first coach, he was a minor league player for a long time. And of course, he ended up getting a break with San Francisco and later on with the Mets. And so anyway, there's a history there. And you know, Kirk Flood comes along, and, well, I think it's an airplane flying overhead. Hopefully we'll go past here. Frank Kirk Flood comes along and helps to remove that reserve clause. And so now, if you're a guy in the minor leagues, they can only hold you there for about 6 seasons. You become a free agent. So, and of course, my coach, I just drew a blank on his name, Sherman Roadblock Jones. If you're looking at Sherman Jones, pitched for the 1962 Mets. That was my first time I actually put on a uniform. It was for Sherman Jones. So anyway, that kind of does it for today. We're about 20 minutes in. I always like to thank you guys for joining in. And so I just want to say hello to you. And I hope that you're enjoying this. If it's something, information that you would like to continue to learn about, be sure and hit a like and subscribe and share it to other people, especially if you're a baseball fan or just a fan of African American history. You want to share this because the information I'm giving you is not from something I read, is from information I've had from interviewing people over a 42-year span. So I can actually say of today, I interviewed people who actually knew Bill Lindsay. If you can imagine that, the guy died in 1914, and I knew people who actually knew him. And of course, I knew many people who knew Andrew Rube Foster, who died in 1930, and was able to interview those. And of course, George Crow, there were a lot of his teammates and members of the National League who were African American and white players who played against him that I was able to talk to. So it's just been a joy to be able to bring this history to you. And I'm going to keep bringing more. So what I do is basically I'll go in and I'll talk about this day, whatever day it is. Tomorrow will be September 2nd. Today is September 1st, 2025. So I'm going to go back and I just start giving you some information and talking about people. So I have this wonderful spreadsheet I started keeping about 30 years ago with historic facts in there. And I try not to give you the low ball stuff that somebody passed away or somebody was born. Anybody can do that. Anybody can do that. But if I'm going to tell you about somebody who died on this day, I'm going to have something else that I can tell you about that individual, which will make it more interesting. Something personal that I can tell you in most cases. So I'm just not just dropping facts like a lot of people do, and they have no substance. And what I try to do is drop information that has substance and information that empowers people, and certainly that empowers these baseball players' legacies. We've got to keep this going. And I had 40 some odd years, but I'm sure there's some young kid out there somewhere that's probably like me, who started off just wanted to be a good baseball fan, and then you started to realize that basically people were lying to you. They're giving you information that is very biased and skewed. And if you're able to see through that, then you begin to tell a different story. And it just so happened I had a lot of great people around me and a great experience growing up. So that kind of does it for me today. I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday and getting down to the last holiday of the year. We're going to keep talking baseball right through the end of the year. Now, coming up, next time I will be out touring, I'm going to be in North Carolina, Rocky Mount. You can look that up in about 2 weeks, and then I'll be in Cleveland. So if anybody's listening or you know anybody in that area, share this broadcast and let them know that I'll be coming there. Of course, I'll be coming there, and when I get there, I'm going to be promoting a couple of my books. I'll be doing a book signing there, in addition to other things. This is my latest book, and this book, Phil Dixon, is part of the Phil Dixon's American Baseball Chronicles, and the great team. I'm talking about in this case, the 1910 Chicago Leland Giants, and it's volume 2. I've finished volume 1, 2, and 3. I'm getting ready. I've decided on which team I'm going to do for volume 4. I just haven't announced it yet. But I go deep. I go deep in these books. And once again, if you're looking for a book with lots of pictures, this particular series is not it. Now, I do have other books. I have the Photographic History, the second book that I published, that has 600 photographs. But here I'm trying to make a difference with information. And so I want people to be well read. And so that is what I'm doing. I'm giving you research in the way that I like to deliver it. So guys, I just want to thank you. And of course, by the way, this book won a Best of Illinois Book Award. So I'm not trying to just sell you on something that has no substance, right? And I've won numerous awards. The book before that won the Jackson County Historical. The book, it was about John Buckle Neal. It won the Jackson County Historical Organization Book Award. And of course, I've had a National Book Award on my photographic history. So, and I've received, awards for writing and literature, researching. I can research it. I can research with the best of them. So anyway, guys, thank you very much. I'm out of here. I'm going to go out here and enjoy my day. They got protests going all over town. I need to go down there and see what's going on. And because we have to keep telling the story of African Americans in America. It can never be washed away. And I always tell people that genie's not going back in the bottle. And people like myself and many, many others are going to make sure that doesn't happen. Thank you, guys. Have a good day and enjoy the rest of your holiday. Thank you.